For our next session, you'll be hearing from some of Australia's leading food companies already active in the fight against food waste and how they're working with Stop Food Waste Australia to make this activity even more meaningful. The session promises to be really valuable for those organisations which have just started out on their food waste journey or are thinking about it. Please welcome to the stage our facilitator, Sam Oakden, the Voluntary Agreement Manager for Stop Food Waste Australia, Bill Heague, the General Manager at Mars, Phoebe Dowling, Head of Sustainability at Simplot Australia, and Rose Gooding, Senior Sustainability Analyst at Goodman Fielder. Thank you.
Thanks for the intro, Pip, and great to be here. Great to see so many familiar faces and some new ones in the audience. I'm Sam Oakden. I have the privilege of leading the team delivering the Australian Food Pact. We work with some of Australia's leading food businesses in a pre-competitive collaboration. A pact model is a new model to Australia, and I'm incredibly grateful to our panellists here today that represent some of the leading voices in food waste reduction in industry. Just a little bit on the Australian Food Pact before we get into questions. I promise I won't talk for too long. We want to hear from our panellists here. 13 months ago when we launched the Australian Food Pact, Steve did touch on this earlier. I'm just going to wait for the slide to pop up. We launched with 8 signatories, and the exciting thing now with 25 signatories is we're building momentum. We've introduced a new tier of signatories called supporting signatories. So these are membership bodies or other groups with networks and memberships that they can disseminate best practice and information rapidly so that we can move the dial faster than we might have otherwise. We've also had a number of new solution providers join the Australian Food Pact. So these are organisations that exist to support industry, be it through technology platforms, through it upcycling, and other solutions that can support industry on their journey to reducing food waste. That's probably enough of an introduction from me. Phoebe, we might start with you. I think most people here will probably have some Simplot product in their freezer, but may not know a lot about Simplot. Can you just introduce yourself and Simplot for us?
Sure, thank you, Sam, and hello, everybody. Can I first just say it's so exciting to be in a room with so many like-minded people and talk about a topic that I'm very passionate about in food waste. So my name's Phoebe Dowling. I'm the Head of Sustainability at Simplot Australia. I look after our sustainability agenda across people, planet and prosperity. One of those areas is, of course, looking at food waste. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Simplot, Simplot is an agricultural and food business. We supply into the food service and retail channels. We have 5 manufacturing sites here in Australia. We support over 300 Australian growers and we employ over 2,000 people across Australia and New Zealand. Some household brands you may recognise include Legos, Birdseye and John West.
Great, thanks Phoebe. Phoebe, Simplot were the first company to join the Australian Food Pact. You were a big part of that decision. What appealed about the pact model to you?
I distinctly remember getting the phone call from Sam. I was actually locked in 2 weeks of quarantine, thank you COVID. It was definitely the most exciting thing that happened in those 2 weeks. So at Simplot, our purpose and mission is to contribute to feeding our world by bringing Earth's resources to life. So you can see that aligning with the Food Pact is so consistent with what it is we are here to achieve as an organisation. Our strategy at the time, when I got the phone call from Sam, included a piece in our 3-year plan, which was contributing to solutions for reducing food waste in our industry. We had no idea how we were going to do that. So when I got the call, I really felt like it was a gift to us. I always say to people in sustainability that you know, if the problems were easy, we would have solved them on our own. So the opportunity to collaborate up and down the supply chain with all levels of government was something that we got really excited about, and I couldn't wait to share it with our executive leadership team, who shared a similar level of excitement, knowing that it was really a great opportunity for us. And there's so many, you know, broad benefits of this. You know, obviously there's the commercial side of it, but of course the pressure that food waste puts on land, energy, climate. You know, there was really nothing not to love about joining the Pact.
Thanks, Phoebe. Bill, I was talking to Bill a couple of weeks ago, and he told me he worked for Mars in Prague. Now, last year, Prague was voted the most beautiful city in the world, but here he is with us on a stage in Brisbane. So, Bill, do you want to talk a little bit about Mars Foods Australia?
Sure, thanks, Sam. Yes, I can attest it is one of the most beautiful places in the world, but fortunately, just before COVID struck, I got to come home with my family, and we got to endure it here. Mars Food Australia, part of Mars Australia, 2,000 associates, as we call them as well, 6 factories on site. The food business, you'd know it by our brands, so Ben's Original Rice, Cantong, Dolmio, and Master Foods, a brand that's been in Australian households for over 75 years. Has built a reputation on taking great Australian ingredients, combining them with flavours from around the world to make some of Australia's famous and most favourite meals in 9 out of 10 households. That's a bit about Mars.
Thanks, Bill. Rose, similarly to Simplot, I'm sure many households have Goodman Fielder product in the pantry or the freezer. Can you tell us a little bit about Goodman Fielder and your brands?
Yeah, sure. So Goodman Fielder is a global food business based out of Australia, New Zealand, Fiji and the surrounding islands, Papua New Guinea and New Caledonia. And we're committed to making everyday food better for everyone. Within Australia, we're home to some of Australia's most loved and trusted brands, which I'm really passionate about. So brands like Wonder, Helga's, White Wings, Praise and Pampas. And we have 11 sites in Australia. And our sustainability strategy, Better Together, involves 9 leading targets, and within them, one of them is our food waste target to halve food waste across our value chain, including in the home by 2030.
Thanks, Rose. We heard a lot this morning about the need for collaboration, and I think the Australian Food Pact is one of the vehicles that we're able to drive collaboration between industry stakeholders. And collaboration can happen at multiple levels, as we know. So just want to talk a little bit about collaboration internally, Phoebe, and what that looks like. How do you get people interested that might be from finance or might be from procurement and bring those different business functions together? How does that work?
Sure. So when your executive leadership team are interested, everybody's interested. So that's a great start. So basically how we approached this was we assembled a cross-functional team because we knew that we couldn't just do it with the sustainability team. So we have people from across marketing, our supply chain, the agricultural side of our business, our logistics side of our business, and brought all of those people, R&D actually is another really important one. We brought all of those people together to be representatives from their different areas, but also to be ambassadors. I guess for us, there was so much activity happening around the business. Manufacturing, we're always focused on efficiencies and, you know, we have a zero loss mindset. So how we approached it was really trying to tie all of those different programs together to make sure that it was really a coordinated effort. Another thing I think is defining the purpose of that food waste team and making sure that it was really important that people recognised that it's not up to this team to solve everything and actually to project manage every food waste reduction or prevention project. It's really around identifying where the opportunities are and making sure that we are sort of enabling the business to push those projects through business processes that are already existing to make sure that they have the best chance of success.
Thanks, Phoebe. Just to the panel, and I think feel free to jump in here. There's so many competing priorities, even within sustainability. How do we determine that food waste should be a priority for our business? Maybe Rose, start with you.
I think for us, we will, as kind of Phoebe was touching on before, food waste reduction from the operations side of things has always been embedded into how we do business, because to run a market-leading, efficient manufacturing organisation. It needs to be measured and tracked and improved. But more holistically, we recognise that as a food organisation, in order to meet our climate targets and our community targets and our consumers' expectations of us, that food waste was a really critical piece of that. And so we made the commitment to embed that into how we do business. And that involves influencing all different people across the organisation, very similar to Phoebe, and making sure that everyone is on board and understands that it's part of everyone's day job to drive a food waste reduction and agenda forward.
What does that look like in practice? How do you put it on people's radar internally that have got all those competing priorities coming at them?
I think it's like any business priority. It's about, once the why is sort of locked in, it's the how, the when, the who, prioritization, cost, benefit, output, etc. And yeah, once it's decided by, I would say, leaders in the business that it's a priority, then it's about having a program of work that is achievable and you're not trying to bite off too much at once, but it's constantly tracking and improvements are made along the way on a full program or roadmap of work.
Fantastic. Bill, as a leader within Mars Foods, what's your perspective on, I guess, setting that culture of we're going to tackle food waste as a business?
Yeah, most people aren't aware that Mars is still a family-owned business. It's been around for 111 years, and like many businesses in this room, we know that we're confronting societal issues that we can't solve alone. And so we believe that the world we want tomorrow starts with how we do business today. And so we think as a family-owned company that has a bit more freedom to operate a bit differently, we can make a difference in how we act. We find it very emotive too. So we heard today about food hunger and the hunger report from Food Bank. Not just the numbers, but the stories that they bring to life that if you've read the report, you'll see as well. And when you look at the problem of food waste and then also what's happening with food insecurity, and you think there are solutions to both of those problems, it's a very easy way to motivate people to really make a difference, and they can feel in their individual roles the difference they can make through the decisions they make every day.
Thanks, Bill. We heard earlier, and Bill, you just touched on it, there's a number of drivers for acting on food waste, be it social, environmental. We know that over 50% of food waste is happening at the consumption end of the supply chain, about a third in households. What's the role of business in that consumer piece? We're talking about a nationwide campaign, there's a lot of moving parts, there's opportunity. What do you see your role as leaders in business in that space?
I think that industry needs to play a critical role in food waste in the home, in the way of helping consumers understand the food waste challenge, and then influencing consumers to change behaviours that ultimately drive down food waste in the home. And I think if you think about industry, we can make the complex really simple. We already have messaging, products and real estate out in the marketplace that consumers are already looking at. And in order to make that really meaningful and impactful, we can link the why for food waste with the how through products, which also represents an opportunity for industry to take hold of. And I think more holistically from a sustainability perspective, I think industry has a real role to play in educating consumers on what's materially sustainable. So in terms of, for example, the packaging versus food waste debate, and helping consumers understand that it's not always one or the other, but it's an overall understanding the impacts in food waste is so big in the home, and making sure that households are using all of every product that they buy.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I thought I might add to that. So including the education for consumers and simple messaging, absolutely. But I think back inside the organisation, actually designing out the food waste and making sure that our new product introduction processes really have those triggers up front, so that we're having those really meaningful discussions around how we design our products with consumer waste reduction in mind.
I'd just add a kind of really foundational element of quality and food safety. Like if you're making a product, it's one bad apple that spoils the bunch. If you've got one bad ingredient that goes into the batch, you have to write off the batch. When people are making meals at home, if you're that one bad ingredient, you have to write off the meal. And so getting that fundamental element right in the first place is hugely important. I agree with the packaging innovation as we're all changing packs. How do they still fulfil the functional purpose they need to do to protect food? But I think we've also heard, how are we designing packs for the households of today? Getting those sizes right and making sure that people can get all the product out of them and not having to waste any as well.
Thank you. Back onto collaboration, Rose, I know for Goodman Fielder, in the conversations we've had, being part of something bigger than just your organisation was a big motivator for joining the Pact. You've also been involved in the bakery sector action plan. Can you give us a little bit of reflection on that process, what it's been like to, I guess, be in the room with supply chain peers and conversations that might not otherwise have happened?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, that was one of the key, I guess, value propositions for us joining the Australian Food Pact, was around the opportunity to collaborate with competitors, customers, suppliers, and other players in the industry to ultimately work on challenges that we can't solve in isolation. And it was an overall positive experience in terms of we had a number of people within our organisation participate in the bakery sector action plan and engage in a different side of things, which I think was really exciting for them. I would just say that sector action plans aren't a silver bullet solution to every challenge faced within the value chain of a particular category, but I think it represents the opportunity to start that conversation with all these different players in a particular category in engaging in a conversation that might not have been had because it's applying an objective lens of food waste rather than everything else. And I think that represents the opportunity to really shift the dial from a food waste perspective on challenges, really complex ones, that materially contribute to food waste.
Fantastic. We've had a question come in from Simon Lockery, and we'll stay with you, Rose, for a second. Goodman Fielder ran a recycling campaign. So you've tested the water in terms of consumer messaging. Do you have any insights on that? Has it worked?
Yeah, I think it was a really exciting one for us, and we've run it for a couple of years now. And last year we actually ramped it up quite a bit with celebrity chefs and the use of social media and really inspiring consumers. If people don't know the campaign, it involves using Pampers pastry to inspire consumers to use yesterday's leftovers for tomorrow's creation. And yeah, it was pretty positive in terms of in one quarter we had in excess of 12.6 million impressions, which just shows the interest is there. So I would say overall positive, and I think there's only more we can do across our brands, across our products, and continuing with pastry as well.
Fantastic. Staying with collaboration, one of the other things we're doing within the Australian Food Pact is facilitating what we call working groups. So these are opportunities that have gone out to our signatory cohort, and they've come back to us and said these are the pre-competitive areas where we think there's an opportunity for Stop Food Waste Australia to have a role facilitating a conversation, bringing us together to discuss some of the things that we might not be able to achieve on our own as food businesses. One of those areas that came back, and we've heard about it a few times, is making the link between food waste and greenhouse gases. We know, I think every business now looking at their greenhouse gas profile, at their Scope 3 emissions, how do we tackle this? Bill, that's one of the things you jumped at, was to be part of that greenhouse gas working group. Can you talk to us about the motivation and what's happening as part of that?
Yeah, we're talking about when I came back from Europe, which was November 2019. I was landing into Sydney and I had to drive up to the Central Coast to see our factory, literally as I landed, which was a bit foolish. But I was being told you can't go up to here today because the bushfires are raging and the roads might be closed and you might not be able to make it. That then was followed by floods, and then we've seen that for the last 3 years. It feels continuously in terms of natural disasters. And I think Australians are becoming far more motivated by this issue than I'm seeing in other parts of the world. And that's driving a level of transparency that they demand from companies who make their food to do better in this space. So yes, I'm personally motivated, but I see consumers, I see our customers are extremely motivated to go faster than other parts of the world in this area. I think the benefits we're getting from working together as a group is, fortunately, there's been a lot of work done in this area in different parts of the world already, and so we can borrow from those standards, we can borrow from things like emission factors to help us understand much more simply the inputs that we put into our products, our processes, and therefore the carbon that comes as a result. And I think we'll be able, therefore, to go much faster than other parts of the world by building on the work that's been already done.
Rose, Phoebe, did you want to touch on the linkages between the other environmental metrics we might be looking at and food waste and how that might play out in your decision making?
It's all interlinked, isn't it? I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing about addressing food waste. You're not just addressing food waste. So, you know, manufacturing in Australia is increasingly tough. Energy prices, that market is in chaos. So anything we can do to conserve the resources and use them for the purpose they're intended rather than end up as waste, i.e. food waste, then we're all going to be better off.
I'm going to go to some questions from the audience, so keep them coming thick and fast. There's some great ones coming through. We've got a theme here about the barriers and enablers. So what are the barriers to acting in food waste? One person's framed it as the wicked problems. Any thoughts?
It's complex, I think, I would say, and who would have thought we'd ever be in a situation, which is great, but everyone wants a piece of our food waste. So actually making those decisions around what we do with our food waste inside a business, it can be really challenging. You know, we want to prioritise food rescue, you know, we want to prioritise the most value for us. We may have waste to energy, conversion that we're talking about, which is really important because of the energy crisis that we were talking about. So I think sometimes because there's so many opportunities for what we can do with our waste, it's difficult to make decisions. But the way we're sort of trying to approach it is just start, just move, just start on something. It may not end up meeting all of the different needs across the business, but we need to start to make progress because 2030 is going to come pretty soon.
Yeah, I heard the theme before about how is this complementary to the other things that we're doing, not an and. The workload for this falls on a part of the organisation, I think for all of us, that are having the most stressed time that they've had in decades. The global supply chain, local supply chains, be it logistics, energy we heard, people working for us in our factories. There are so many factors that are making this hard. And when you put it on that part of the organisation, although here's another thing that I want you to do, it can be really tough. But when we all want to reduce costs in our operation, we all want to reduce waste, and you can start to see this is complementary. In fact, this perspective brings a new skill set, a new lens to the way that you look at your business that you didn't look at before, and all of a sudden you're seeing costs that you didn't see before and waste that you didn't see before. It can be a real unlocker. So I'd say, how can you find the complementary in this agenda rather than looking at it as an and?
Another question that comes through from Ian Lees Galloway. Given the intended purpose of food manufacture is to feed people, what's the role of food rescue in the food waste story?
Food rescue has a huge role. There's absolutely no doubt about it. I think it's our responsibility to make sure that food rescue is prioritised where possible, absolutely. And I think the power of the Food Pact is our ability to work together with food rescue organisations so that we can work out what's the best way of doing that so that it's a win-win situation all around.
And I think I'd just add to that I think historically maybe it's been a one-sided conversation with industry and food rescue, and I think there's way more value that can come out of collaborating and understanding where the need is and what's the best way to deliver to that need, because ultimately, they are parallel, not competing ideas. Even if you just reduce food waste like down to zero hypothetically, there would still be a place for food rescue given the need out in the community.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I think there's obviously a role for industry in community good. Kind of linked and related, we've got a question here from Travis. Back to consumer messaging, and how do you sell consumer food waste reduction when that could result in less sales as an FMCG business? Where does that balance sit for you guys?
I can make a start. A consumer who looks in their pantry and sees a product that they're quote unquote continuously throwing out because they haven't found a way to use it doesn't last a long time. And so I think it's our job to make sure that if we've motivated someone to get it off the shelf and into their basket and into their pantry, how are we doing just as good a job to make sure that it's landing on the plate at the same time? Because if we don't, we will become irrelevant and then we won't make our way into the basket. So I think it's very intrinsic.
And I think we'll be left behind if it's not looked at because, yeah, as you said, consumers will just stop buying it.
Yeah, absolutely. Linking those two things together, Bill, I know Mars has been working with Yumi. Yumi is one of our great solution providers. And I know that predates the Australian Food Pact, so we won't try and take credit. But can you talk us through that journey and what that additional collaboration's meant for you guys?
Yeah, g'day Katie and Cammy who are in the group. Great to see you here. Yeah, we started about 18 months ago and it's really broken a contradiction for us, I think, implied in that last question around, well, if we do a really good job with waste, does that mean we'll do less of a job with donations? I've been in the industry for a while. Anyone who's had to deal with clearance, there's a lot of people who work really hard there to make sure that we're turning a resource into something valuable. But it's very hard, very difficult. And to Katie's credit, she's built something that's generated trust between buyers and sellers on a platform that enables us to make the most economic value out of those products and make sure we're not losing all those precious resources that have been put into them to make them. And if we aren't able to find a home commercially for them, that they find their way directly to food donation organisations to make sure that there's no waste there. But the paradox that's been broken is actually every time we do that and we generate less waste and less cost from our clearance activities, that frees up money to do deliberate actions with food donation organisations. So, and I know Simplot's been a big part of this as well, but the collaborative supply program with Food Bank means we've gone from the surprise chain of, here's something that we can't sell and can you do something with it, to when do you need some product and what are the most useful products, and let's build a program with you that designs those products that are going to be most useful when they're most useful, and actually enable more meals. So we've gone from 250,000 meals 2 years ago to 1.5 million meals this year with them by able to find that proxy, that economic value in that set. And Yumi's been a huge part of that, and I'd recommend a lot of people to check them out and see how they can help you as well.
Fantastic. I think that's one thing that we talk to all of our signatories about as they join the Food Pact is as they are preventing waste, and hopefully we're able to do interesting things to reduce waste, but how do we make sure we maintain or increase our donation volumes? Because and move towards that more programmatic donation. So we're still filling that need, but doing it in a way that actually meets the need when it occurs and the products required. So that's a fantastic story, Bill. I want to come back to the really practical elements of what it means to be an Australian Food Pact signatory. And one of the fundamental commitments for the Australian Food Pact is our annual reporting process. We're signatories, so all of our signatories provide data back to us every year. We can then aggregate that and report back. I just want to talk a little bit, what's your reflection on that process? We've done it once. We've just gone back to our signatories with the aggregated data, and we're in the process now of going back with individual company data and talking through that. What's that experience been like of having a specific look at food waste data? Phoebe.
Thank you, Sam. So, look, it's been a fantastic experience. I've been fairly impatient in the world of food waste. I've wanted to be able to make as much progress as possible, but we actually haven't been able to make all that much progress until we understand the data. So what is it we're actually dealing with? And so going through the process has really allowed us to understand that, has allowed us to see where we can extract the most value, therefore where we can prioritise. And also it's great to get that sense that you're a part of something bigger and understand sort of how your business fits in with all of the other organisations. And I guess this is the first pivotal moment where we can see that coming together around, okay, well, here we are, year one, and then, we can work from, I guess, that baseline now.
Any other reflections?
I think for us, a lot of the data, or majority of it, was sitting in various places across the business, and so pinning it to international standards and pulling it all together, also identified maybe where some data is lacking or is less robust than it needs to be. And yeah, I think it just brings credibility to that process as well, is that it's being looked at by an external and it's an international standard. I think the insights that also have come back, again, it adds that credibility. It kind of fast tracks turning data into meaning that then can result in actions that then result in output that ultimately reduce food waste and ensure that the actions we're focusing on are materials. So yeah, for us, it's been a really valuable process, and I think year on year, it's just going to become part of what we do and therefore continually sort of snowballing into bigger and better outcomes.
I'd say it's been a bit awkward and a bit enlightening. I think this industry had a push a bit over a decade ago around zero waste to landfill, and so we thought we had that job sorted. And actually, where the data lives can be disparate around the organisation and how you classify it and who regards it as what and what's the quality of that data. We've found that we're lacking in that. We've got a degree of data, but this has really helped us understand it to a greater level. And then I add then the technical audit. So we had Emil and Leanne and Nick come up to site, walk the line with us, open our eyes as to waste that we didn't see before that all of a sudden we can't not see anymore. So armed with that classified information, but then also that real world experience on our line, and that the impact on our associates, our employees who now look at our processes differently, that's been the real big benefit of it. So awkward, but worth going through that awkwardness.
Great to hear. Phoebe, I think that's something Simplot has found as well, not necessarily the awkwardness, I won't put words in your mouth, but we've got a high-level data reporting process, but you as well have had Stop Food Waste Australia staff come out on site and have that fresh lens. And can you talk about what that's meant for your planning?
Sure. So I had the pleasure of taking Mark and Sam down to Tasmania to our farm and a few of our factories. And then it was really a conversation that we had then that made us realise that we needed a whole new next level of granularity to be able to make a meaningful plan and understand our food waste data in our vegetable processing manufacturing facility. So it was then that we engaged Leanne, who I believe is here, from Stop Food Waste Australia, who came down to our site. And really we developed together a methodology for how we can profile all of our waste at that plant. And as Bill said, we learnt new things that we didn't really realise around, what was the accumulation period of that waste, what was the contamination level of that waste, the temperature of that waste, what are the hot spots, where is it that we actually need to focus, and the value of that food waste, contamination, and all of those types of things, which are really important for us to then bring into the site program, which has been done, around, well, what are the key things, the key areas of waste that we need to prioritise and put actions against. Of course, prioritising prevention where possible, but that really allowed the site to be able to run with that program and understand where to focus on their efforts. And then so we've done that for 2 manufacturing sites now with the intention to do that with all of our other sites, just appreciating the value that it's bringing.
Just going to probe a little bit more there.
Sure.
What does that mean practically now? We've got a little bit more data, we have more visibility, we know that there's opportunities. What's Simplot doing with that, and what's the plan to talk me through the next 12 months, 2 years?
Sure, so an example could be something like our reject equipment for rejecting defects. So the accumulation of rejected material, sort of having a new understanding of that, and then looking at, well, what simple equipment modifications can be made to reduce the level of defects in that place. And it's not that we don't look at these things all the time, but when you just come in with a food waste mindset, it allows you to look at particular areas like that, and then that gets put on sort of the site action plan. And then in terms of what it will look like over the next sort of 1 to 2 years, so as I said, we need to repeat this exercise across all of our crops, across all of our plants. So that will take us sort of the next 6 to 9 months. And so the idea is that that program of managing the prevention and identifying the hotspots and doing what we can at the sites will become self-sufficient through our manufacturing sites, so that we, as a central food waste team, can look more broadly, apply the same thinking to our agricultural side of our business, where we think there's huge opportunity but also huge challenges. And so the idea is that we do that full supply chain mapping using all of this information to get us to finally a point where we can see where our biggest areas of opportunity and identify an enterprise program of work to start tackling these.
Fantastic. Rose, Goodman Fielder has also had similar experiences where you've applied a specific food waste focus within a manufacturing environment. Do you want to touch on what that's looked like?
Yeah, I guess a good example of that is at our Burleigh Heads factory, where we found that a lot of the bread was sticking inside the tins, and obviously that contributes to quite a significant amount of waste. And by applying that lens, we invested in the capital to replace all the tins at that site, as well as like staff training and those kinds of elements, and that resulted in a 45% reduction in waste at that site, purely by just looking at that lens and saying, well, this is the sort of cause, what can we do for that? And yeah, so it's a pretty exciting example, and I guess the Australian Food Pact represents the opportunity to apply that lens across everything, so that those sorts of opportunities come to light for us to take hold of.
We could almost leave it there, couldn't we, I think? I think that's a really positive light on what a fresh set of eyes can do in a manufacturing environment. It's not always going to be that type of return that easily. How has that worked for your businesses, translating a central sustainability function, or in your case, Bill, as the boss, to the operational teams, and actually going back to embedding that mindset within operational staff and on the floor? How's that worked?
I think broadly, it's shifting the mindset around food waste being like a cost cutter to being an opportunity for investment that ultimately results in a return, but we all need to be sort of on that bus and on that journey to do it. So it means different things to different people. If you're on the operational line, obviously it's something you physically see, and if you're putting all your time and energy into producing something, you want it to go to its intended use. So that's where the focus is for us from operations versus different areas of the business, that it means something different, or the value there is different. So I think it's about tweaking the messaging and the whys for who you're talking with, who the stakeholder is, and what part of the business you're talking to. I don't know if you guys have anything you want to add to that.
I'll just say that the mindset's already there in manufacturing. We wouldn't have survived in manufacturing if we didn't have that mindset. But looking just through a food waste lens, I think, is what is new and refreshing, and probably there's still some opportunity. Even having us on site, the Stop Food Waste Australia team, and having the continuous improvement teams actually talking about food waste specifically, not other waste that's happening around the factories. But actually just having those conversations is just bringing a new, fresh thinking with operators. And we're now seeing people contacting us around, well, gosh, we noticed this food waste opportunity, what do you think? So it's just really getting people to, I guess, tweak what they're already thinking around reducing food waste. The other great thing, actually, I was at our Managing Director Awards last week in Melbourne, and it was really great to see that one of the nominations was an operator that works down on the line in our factory in Tasmania, who had identified an opportunity to reduce cauliflower waste, and had managed to reduce the cauliflower waste by up to 2% in her area. So it's just really great to see that people are thinking about it, and our business is rewarding people for thinking about it.
Yeah, I'd almost flip the challenge, Sam, and say that talent attraction is a problem we're all facing at the moment. The role of purpose that plays, and you've heard us all talk about our business purposes today. At Mars, we want to be sustainable in a generation. We want to be carbon neutral, Scope 3 by 2050, and that's great to have that ambition as a global corporation. And in fact, we've had our first year of decoupling of carbon versus our 2015 base and our growth. But bringing that to life for each and every associate, and I did this and I have contributed to that larger goal, is very meaningful. I feel it in my job, and I think a lot of people feel it in their jobs as well. And if I can make that clear link between, hey, there was this problem, I've looked at it in this new lens that I have now through food waste, and I've been able to make a difference, and I can see myself in that contribution to this massive goal. If you can make that work, then yeah, you can really tap into the motivations of each and every person that works for you.
Fantastic. We've had a lot of questions come through, and thank you for them, quite operational around how do you join the Pact, etc. Our whole team is here over the next 2 days, so please seek us out at the stand in the foyer and have a chat. We'd love to talk you through. I'm not going to go through all of the operational aspects right now, but I did get a question from Helen Steele saying who should join the Australian Food Pact, and I think we heard earlier today everyone has a role in this food waste journey. If you're a food business or you have a solution that can support food businesses on this waste journey, if you're an industry body who has networks and is able to disseminate best practice or give us a platform, you have some information you'd like to share relating to food waste, please get in touch. That is the whole purpose, to drive that collaboration. We're going to go back to data, just because we've had a few questions on that as well. And it was touched on that we have an internationally consistent, recognised methodology. We're starting to see, and thanks Melissa for this question, we're starting to see mandatory reporting and legislation popping up around reporting. You're all global businesses, you're seeing that as much as we are. How do you see the Australian landscape from a regulatory perspective? I don't want to put you on the spot too much, but do you think we're going that way, and how does being part of a voluntary program now set up Australia? Are we on the right track? Bill?
I'll make a start. On a long enough time frame, yes. And that's because that's where the consumer is going. Our ability to process and digest so much more information than we used to be able to now means that when I am at the shelf and I'm weighing up a couple of brands, I'm thinking about things like food waste and carbon and water. So if you want to be a brand that's relevant in the future, this is something you have to solve for. And you can either wait for it to be imposed upon you and then you're on the back foot, or you can acknowledge that and get on the front foot now and start solving some of these issues. But I think to be relevant to consumers, you have to face into this.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think if you get ahead of it, then there's value for the organisation in terms of, as you said, when you're in the supermarket, it is something that sticks out, versus if you're going to wait for legislation to come through, it just means you're kind of just with the pack, I would say. But that's not to say that shouldn't still be part of the responsibility on food waste moving forward across Australia. It's just to say, as an organisation, it's important to recognise where value is in terms of action and activity.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Rose, because I think we can talk about food waste, and I think there's some challenge with the term waste. What we're talking about is a resource, and we have an opportunity to capture value. And I think the more we can reinforce that, and I think that message is true whether we're talking about the consumer story, and we talk, $2,500 to $3,000 per household, whether we're talking about within our businesses, we're talking about capturing value and that's all it is when we're talking about moving material up the food recovery hierarchy. 2 minutes left. You are all leaders in the space. Your businesses are actively leading, as are our other Australian Food Pact signatories. What would be your encouragement to peers that haven't yet made the jump? What's your experience been? What are your reflections? Be honest. Start with you, Bill.
I remember confronted with this decision, should we do it? This is a big problem. It's been around for decades. How are we going to solve it in 10, actually 8 to go? And I'm going to be on the hook. And I just think you're better off making a start. And actually taking a leadership position usually comes at a cost. All we've talked about today is actually saving resources and saving money. So just jump in and have a go. This is going to be an investment in being a leader, but it's actually going to save you money.
Phoebe?
I also think it's our opportunity to make a difference at scale. Why wouldn't you want to be a part of that? And I think, being able to use the tools that are available to us is really important. The knowledge that's come from the UK around how they've successfully done this, I think that's a huge advantage as well.
And then I think just to add to that, I think as a food organisation or as any organisation that engages with food, in order to meaningfully and tangibly make a difference to the communities you operate in, from a sustainability and carbon perspective, food waste is a pretty good place to start. And you don't have to go at it alone. Like, the systems already exist. There's a rubric around how you go about that, and really technical, skilled people that can get that journey started. So I would just say, why not? Like, get going.
Fantastic. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I just thought I'd add one more thing. Being a part of the Food Pact means that we're all trying to solve a problem that we all have. And so it gives us access to technology, innovation. You know, we're able to support startup accelerators like Rocket Seeder and really, understand what, what things are actually out there, and help each other connect the dots and solve some of our problems.
Fantastic. Please join me in thanking our panel today.